So let's begin with Alex Zhavoronkov. In the breaks, you'll see that we've established a little bookstore outside there in the prep area, and you'll be able to follow up, as I'm sure you will wish to, tantalizing bits of ideas and information that the speakers will provide. Nice to see you here, Alex.
Thank you, Moses. It's a pleasure it's an honor to speak at this conference, and I'd like to make a small detour into some history. I first met Moses at a very prominent conference on aging called SENS, Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence in Cambridge. And since then, I was following the ZoomerLife movement and the Zoomer magazine, and got a few ideas from there as well. So I think what Moses is doing is great, and I don't think that radical life extension is a utopia. I think everybody here in this audience has a fighting chance of living significantly longer lives. I'm Canadian myself, and I spent some time in Kingston, Ontario, and in Vancouver and in Toronto, working here. But at some point of time, I realized that I started looking at various causes in the human history that will make impact in the future. And there is global warming, there is climate change, there is alternative energy, there is poverty, diseases. And I thought that, okay, what's the most important cause? And I kind of realized that the most important cause is aging, because aging is the #1 killer in the world. It takes away more than 100,000 people a day. And here in Canada, you see that the demographics are changing as well. So if you think that there is anything good about aging, we will disagree. I dedicate my life to fighting aging on various levels, both in terms of biology, economics, and psychology. And here are some of my present affiliations. There are many. All of them have a central theme, central topic, fighting aging. So one of those projects, Neuroinformatics, for example, is an IT company which looks at ways to recognize imagined visual images through very simple electroencephalography devices with the intention to combat combat age-related diseases and detect the onset of neurodegenerative diseases early. We have a couple papers published on that, and we have a US patent on that. I also run a laboratory of regenerative medicine at the largest oncohematology center on Earth, with more than 4,000 primary cancer patients, more than 300 bone marrow transplantations a year in pediatrics in kids. I study Hutchinson-Gilford syndrome. That's the accelerated aging in kids. But my most important projects, a project that I actually spoke about at the conference attended by Moses, that's the aging portfolio. It's currently the largest knowledge management system tracking progress in aging research in a variety of disciplines. So 3 takeaway points from this presentation. So if you were, there will be many ideas in this talk, but three ideas that you should carry back home with you is that human longevity is very likely to increase much faster than you think. So we are currently on the exponent on many of the areas of technology in biomedicine. This increases in life expectancy are probably going to cause some economic hurdles. So many of you are unprepared for increases in longevity, unprecedented increases in longevity. I'm not talking about a margin of 5, 10, 20 years. I'm talking about something significantly longer. And governments and pension funds are not prepared for that as well. And I speak enough to pension funds both in Europe and here in North America, and none of them is prepared for what's coming, if we're going to see that. And a few ideas just to entertain yourself, and well, maybe try to improve your quality of life and reduce psychological aging, is that you should adjust your life horizon. So maybe you should already think about living to 150 years. You'll you'll feel better, you'll make decisions a little bit more differently. So, and that's something that's achievable, and I'll tell you why in a second. So that's actually a cartoon from one of the cartoon competitions I ran on one of the websites. It's fun. Some of the longest living people on Earth did not really have any kind of behavioral patterns that could be traced to diet or exercise. Some of the supercentenarians alive today, they really lived normal lifespans. They didn't follow any diet. So diet and exercise will not cure aging. And as a matter of fact, the only way to achieve radical life extension is through intervention. I have SANS in here. SANS stands for Strategies for Engineered Negligible Senescence. That was the first model suggested by a friend of mine and a colleague, Dr. Aubrey de Grey out of Cambridge, who runs the SANS Foundation, which funds and supports various areas to extend healthy working lifespan, healthy productive lifespan, and extend life significantly. So currently, if you look at your lifespan, anybody's lifespan, evolution designed us to compete, then come into this life, compete again, reproduce, then take care of our young, and then gracefully decline. So, and that's valid on both a physiological level and psychological level. So evolution took care of, regardless of whether you believe in evolution or you believe that the world was created in 7 days or longer, those are facts. And psychologically, we are predisposed to becoming happier as we age, becoming more content, taking it as given and taking it as a natural process. So today I want you to think about ways to avoid this kind of thinking and try to combat aging in any way possible. Try to extend your life, and I'll give you a few ideas on that. So again, prevention and diet, exercise, good behavior, it can only marginally extend your longevity. There is no yogi in the world that lived past 122 and a half years. That's the current record in life expectancy. And there are lots of Indians in India and here in Canada, so we would know if anybody would have lived to this kind of age. So the only way to increase longevity is through intervention. And there are many discoveries in both information technologies and biomedicine that will lead to those significant leaps in life extension in a very near future. So on this chart, you probably cannot see it very well. There is a history of humanity in terms of the population growth. That small curve on the bottom is population growth of the population component. That's people over 65. That's a very new paradigm in the world. And all those small notes are major discoveries that were made in during human progress. So think about it. It took us 400 years for the population to double from 500 million to 1 billion. Then it's 160 years for it to double again from 1 billion to 2 billion. Speaking about real estate prices in Toronto, actually, that's what's driving it probably. Most of the human progress was made over the past 60 years, and population tripled to 7 billion. So we're on the exponent in many areas of science and technology, and there is an unprecedented amount of funding going into biomedical research. We're talking about billions of dollars. Very few of that funding is going into aging research per se, but a very large amount of that funding is going into areas that are related to aging research. That funding translates into publications. So there is a centralized kind of Google-like interface that we use as scientists to track progress in our areas called PubMed. So you can see that the progress in publications is a little bit slower than funding. And most likely we're going to see an exponential increase in the very near future in terms of knowledge creation in aging research. So this is again another cartoon. Well, I would say, why did we not defeat aging yet? It's because currently most of the biomedical scientists and funding are focused on combating age-related diseases. Very few people are looking at the root cause, at the aging processes per se, and ways to slow down aging. And why we don't see a lot of those discoveries on the market today is because it takes a very long time for discovery in biomedical sciences to progress into clinic and into mass adoption. As compared to information technology, where you conceive and describe an idea, publish, and it's on the market in a couple of years. So some of you here probably have never held a mobile phone 20 years ago, right? It's something new, something that we see expanding and accelerating the information technology. But in biomedicine, things are more or less quiet, but there's a lot of things brewing in the laboratories worldwide. So the general paradigm in science is that you conceive and describe an idea. It can take you, like this every day. I have a policy, an idea a day. So if I don't generate an idea, I don't eat dinner. Many people have the same paradigm, so very good paradigm to have for yourself. To conceive and describe an idea, it can take you minutes. Then you get funding. It may take you a couple of years if you're applying for grants. Then you perform experiments. It may take you several years to decades. Then you try to publish. Again, sometimes it's a year, a couple years. I have currently several publications that are in review for over a year. You kind of bounce the ball back with the reviewers. Then you go through preclinical trials that may take you a few years, and then you get into phases of clinical trials regulated by FDA, Food and Drug Administration in the US, major regulator, and that may take you decades. And then you get into clinical propagation, mass adoption. Again, it could be decades. And then we may not even get into prevention. If aspirin was discovered today, we probably wouldn't see it as an over-the-counter drug. So my guess would be that the average time for a geroprotector, something that protects you from aging, is 40 years to reach the market and propagate. So to understand the very early trends in biomedicine, I've created with a very large team a resource called the Aging Portfolio. It currently tracks about $1 trillion worth of biomedical grant data classified into 360 categories related to aging research, both in natural sciences and social and behavioral sciences. So we look at the very root of biomedical progress, the funding, the dollars, and then try to evaluate the longevity dividends that are going to stem from that research. Only very small fraction, again, of those money is going into aging research, something that really contributes to increases in longevity. And we source data from a variety of fields. One is the major funding source is the NIH, the National Institute of Health. It's about over $30 billion a year. National Science Foundation, European Commission, Australia, Canada, national governments. So a variety of fields. And also we have a clone of PubMed, the largest repository of biomedical publications. And we can play around with data, look at the trends, look at what's going to come in the very near future. It's a very nice tool to analyze trends in biomedicine and in aging per se. It has a machine learned component as well, so we kind of automatically classify data. This is data from CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in the US. You see the demographic shifts in the US from the 1900s to today and to 2030. You can see that the baby boomer component is very significant. So before we didn't have that. And that has implications on dependency ratios. So it costs a lot of money to have a retired person living for a long time. So in the US, it's about maybe over $30-something thousand a year when you qualified, when you're over 65. If you have an unprecedented lifespan, that creates a toll on the economy, and we need to kind of adjust for that proactively. So I have a paper published on various scenarios studying from biomedicine and looking at various longevity increases in the US. So we currently believe that there is a debt pyramid. Everybody is talking about $17 trillion in debt that the US have, and they are trying to adjust it every year. But that's nothing. That's the tip of the iceberg. If you think about the Social Security, net present value of Social Security liabilities to their population, and moreover, healthcare liabilities to the population, it's even if we consider a very conservative lifespan of maybe 80 years, we're talking about $60 trillion that is under the water that nobody sees. If we're talking about longevity increases, we're getting into trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. We're talking about maybe $300 trillion if life expectancy goes to 87. And there are many books that describe this paradigm that are already raising red flags about the economy. So you can, and some of them are by major economists. I read all of those books, and there are many recommendations that people are making. Well, first is austerity measures, basically cut spending, increase transparency, tax the rich. We love that term, tax the rich. Linking currency to physical assets, to gold, increasing spending, market regulations through government intervention, and investment in environmental programs and clean energy. Well, all of that actually will probably constrain growth and at some point of time slow down the economy. People will still live longer and age and exit the labor force. So what we created, we developed a new model of economic growth, which is called productive lifespan model. We're trying to publish it right now. It's very difficult. Where we're looking at three periods in a person's time, in any individual's time. It's basically the retirement age, healthy productive age, and the age of death. And we're looking at the biomedical progress rate, the rate which shifts the age of death forward, and of course also increases the productive longevity. And it comprises of two rates. The rejuvenation rate, that's basically the rate at which your functions are restored, lost function due to aging are restored, and non-rejuvenating biomedical progress rate is basically when you're already on a deathbed and we're still trying to save you, we're trying to keep you alive, give you another maybe 3-4 years of life, but at that time the person is not contributing to the economy. And our hypothesis is that the economy is going to grow if the rejuvenation rate outpaces the non-rejuvenating biomedical progress rate, or the retirement age is proactively increased. So there are many ways to keep people involved in the labor force and working by accelerating aging research and mass adoption, informing people that they're going to be living longer, creating centers for lifelong learning and career planning. And that could be a major source of growth in the economy. If that doesn't happen, we're probably going to see a major economic decline and economic collapse. So I've made some recommendations. I'm out of time, I know, I'm sorry. Maybe 2 minutes, if you don't mind, 2. So we can accelerate aging research, proactively increase the retirement age, redirect the funding of biomedical projects to really solving the problem of aging and not trying to extend that non-productive age on the deathbed of a person, because that's not economically viable currently. And accelerate the propagation of laboratory discoveries in clinical and mainstream use. That's easily done by changes in the regulation. So on some of the ideas for you today, just to make this talk fun, it has been dry so far. Well, think about setting yourself a goal of 150 years. Even if you're 90, even if you're 100 right now, it is possible to live to 150, and I'll show you why. And also, you may want to make aging competitive. So, make a bet with one another to see who can live longer. Set your ageometer, kind of the speedometer for aging, to 150, because that's something achievable, something very achievable. You know this person? That's Jeanne Calment. She lived to 122 and a half years. She quit smoking when she was like 109 because she had some lung problems. And the funny thing is that when she was around 90, she made a bet with her landlord that he is going to inherit her apartment and give her a small annuity for the rest of her life. So she outlived him, and I think she outlived his wife. So I think there is something emotional. When you're competing for something, you put the extra mile. So that's something that you should consider to live to those major advances in regenerative medicine and biotechnology that will extend our life through interventions. That will happen for sure. I mean, think about the world of apnea. The world of apnea, free diving, when people hold their breath and dive. I kind of tried to do it. I went to 30 meters on a single breath. So this guy, Raimondo Bashar, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, Italian, he made a bet for 50,000 lira to go on a single breath to 30 meters. And he did that in 1949. I just did it recently. So apnea world records, you know what it is currently? People are holding their breath to 20 minutes and going down on a single dive to 214. Think about those numbers, right? You probably haven't even imagined that just a little while ago. So that's same for lifespan. You can live longer. You will live longer, most likely. And we can either see an economic collapse or we can see a major source of economic growth coming from those life extension increases. So you can take a look at my book. I've actually have a major component dedicated to technologies that are going to increase life expectancy. And stay strong and healthy. And please try to think about the lifespan horizon increasing to 150. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Alex. It's very exciting. So, Alex, as far as I understand it, the only reliable form of life extension available to us today is severe calorie restriction. And many people have observed, you may not live longer, but it'll sure feel like it's a lot longer. And the other way, with fruit flies, that they've achieved radical extensions, 3 times, 4 times the regular lifespan of a fruit fly by inhibiting its ability to reproduce. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun either.
Well, there are actually many more methods to extend lifespans of model organisms like fruit flies or mice. Right. As a matter of fact, we don't know if caloric restriction works on humans. And a few studies on primates recently failed. And they are kind of dissecting the data right now, but it looks like it doesn't work in humans. So just don't. I spent 2 years on caloric restriction. Don't.
We had a speaker at Idea City a number of years ago who was attempting such a practice in a rigorous way, a scientist. And he was eating something in the order of 1/3 to 1/2 less per day of what was the recommended minimum. It was a blazing hot day in June. He was dressed in 3 layers of clothing. It was constantly drooling from his nose. It was a pathetic sight, really. But he was devoted to this experiment, and it reminds me I should check in and see if he's still alive.
What was his name?
What's that?
Was it Michael Ray?
Yes, it was Michael Ray.
Yeah, I know him very well.
You know him.
Yeah, of course. He co-authored Aubrey's book. Right. And yes, it's not a pleasant experience. And as a matter of fact, if you do this kind of practice, you probably should get on antidepressants because you are going to have a lot of emotional, psychological problems. But at the same time, you become much more productive because you don't need to consume food. You don't spend more time around the dinner table. So you start doing something. So at that time, I remember this time as being the most productive time of my life. But there are many drugs that mimic caloric restriction. And that you can probably already start thinking about. So maybe if you read Zoomer magazine and Popular Press and then look at more scientific data, try to educate yourself about it because you are the only decision maker who is going to make decisions for your own health, whether to take a drug or not to take a drug, because there is no proven data for most of the drugs, because it requires multi-year, multi-decade studies to understand whether a drug affects life expectancy or not. Lifespan, I'm talking about, sorry. And the only person who can be the judge of that is you. So first thing to start would be education. So you need to really educate yourself on some of those drugs. Some of those drugs you're already taking, maybe statins, beta blockers, metformin, aspirin. So all of those drugs, in theory, are already extending your lifespan.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's an honor.
So.